right, you're listening to HawkeTalk. I'm here today with Kikkan Randall. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. So I imagine, like, from the delivery room, you're skiing down the hallways, and from day one, that was it. You were a cross country skier.
Well, I certainly had some good family background that I was coming from. Both my parents are avid skiers, and
Awesome.
and their families are skiers as well. But I think it was a year before I was on skis for the first time.
But you were 1 year old when you were on skis for the first time.
I was. My birthday is New Year's Eve, and we were living in Salt Lake City at the time. My dad worked at a rental shop, and he brought home the smallest skis and boots they had and built a hill for me in the front yard. And he said I just had the biggest smile on my face.
That's awesome. And so, born in Salt Lake, I take it?
Born in Salt Lake City, my mom had skied for the University of Utah and returned there to go to law school.
Yeah.
And my dad was working up at the ski areas of Deer Valley.
Oh, amazing. Got it. And okay, so did your mom also ski professionally, or was it just in college, or did your parents pursue the professional side of it?
My mother just skied collegiate skiing, and that was actually before it became an NCAA. I think it was the NAIA back then. Women's skiing really had just gotten started because she was in college in the 70s, right as Title IX was really kicking in.
Yeah.
So my mom is an incredible athlete. She says she just didn't quite have the drive to take it as far as I did.
Yeah.
But I certainly can just see the strength even that she has today at almost 70 years old. And then my dad fell in love with alpine skiing in high school and ended up timing the World Pro skiing circuit for a few years, traveling all around the West. So while he didn't race himself, his claim to fame is that he got to share a Pepsi with Jean-Claude Keely once.
That's awesome. And so, from 1 year old, you love skiing. Was it just, for lack of a better word, off to the races then? Like, your parents were like, oh, she loves it, let's keep going with it. And then, like, you just started progressing, or how did that come to be as a kid?
We moved to Alaska when I was 3.
Wow.
So my whole memorable life has actually been up in Alaska. And I just remember a lot of playing in the snow when I was a kid, and certainly got my first turns on downhill skis. At age 6, I started a program here in Anchorage called the Anchorage Junior Nordic League. And I did it for a year, and I did not love it.
Huh.
Cross country skiing was a little bit more work because you had to go up the hills.
Yeah.
It was cold. Up here in Alaska, it's dark. So after a year, my parents said, "Okay, you're free to try other things." And I spent a few years doing other stuff. And then around 6th grade, I came back to it because my aunt, who was an Olympic skier, and my other aunt, who had skied in college, were both coaches.
Wow.
And my cousin was doing it, and so all of a sudden, I was like, "Well, I kind of wanted to do stuff with them." So I got pulled back into it. But 6th, 7th, and 8th grade were all about downhill skiing and downhill racing.
Uh-huh.
Tommy Moe had won the Olympic gold medal in Lillehammer in '94, and he was a local Alaskan hero. So wanted to follow in his footsteps in Peekaboo Street. So I really thought alpine was going to be my pursuit. So I did that all the way up through 8th grade. And then in 9th grade, I had planned to do alpine and cross country because I was getting into running, and all my running friends were doing cross country skiing in the winter.
Yeah.
So for the social side, I thought I would do that. But it quickly became apparent that it was going to be hard to balance the practice demands, the equipment costs to carry both of those sports.
Yeah.
And so I ended up kind of pulling over to cross country, and then things just started to click into place from there.
I was gonna say, what made you pull into cross country from alpine? Like, were you naturally better at it? Did you obviously had the social aspect? Like, what do you think it was that you decided to sacrifice the alpine side?
Well, it's easy to be able to look back now and see the blend of factors that pulled me that way. My couple years of serious alpine racing, I showed some promise, but I also spent 2 years as the alternate to the championship team. So I got to see what it was like to be close, but not on the team.
Yeah.
So in the end, I think that was such good character building for me. But as soon as I switched over to cross country, I made the junior national team my freshman year of high school. I got to go compete. I got some top 10s. So there was clearly some physical talent that was more applicable to cross country. But I really say it was the people. It was the people that pulled me over. They were my running friends. They were just such genuine people. We had so much fun out there exploring around on our skis, playing. And then around the age of 16, my running coach moved out of town, and I needed a new training group for the summer. And I happened to get introduced to this Olympian named Jim Galanis, who was starting a new program here in Anchorage with a completely different vision for how American skiers could be successful. So I was intrigued with his vision, and I was also intrigued by the fact that the Salt Lake Olympics were just 3 years away.
Yep.
And while it was very naive and a little bit ambitious to think about making that team at such a young age, that's what inspired me. And so I kind of switched my focus from running goals to skiing goals at age 16. And again, the physical talent, the desire, the friend group, everything just started to pull together. And I got to go to Europe for the first time.
Amazing. And so as a kid, like when did the real training for whether it was alpine, when did you start that? Like when did the like competitive side of it start for you? What age?
I would say I've always been competitive. I think around 6th grade is when I started to realize that if you set a goal and you systematically work towards it, that gave you the best chance of success.
Yeah.
So we had a mile run at my elementary school, which was 4.5 laps around our school.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to set a course record. And so I started running more after school. Like it wasn't super disciplined training or anything, but I started to run every day. And, I set the record like I wanted to. And so from then on, it was kind of like, okay, I want to be a part of programs that help me progress. And I played competitive soccer. I did the alpine skiing. I was doing the running and then into cross country.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gradually built. And I will say, like, it didn't feel like training to me. It was showing up at a place with people I really enjoyed being around, with coaches that were motivating and just great people. And I got to go out and I got to give my best. And yes, it was physically painful, but there was also the endorphin kick afterwards. And I just started to get addicted to that. And really throughout my entire 20-year career as a professional skier, it was not about the training. It was just about showing up and doing it every day. And it was cool how that built up over time.
Yeah, I love that. And so, and by the way, the access to all these Olympians, is that just normal for Alaska or like how did that happen?
Well, that's another, just maybe lucky coincidence for me.
Mhm.
I grew up in a family with 2 Olympians.
Yeah.
My aunt and uncle had gone to the Olympics and cross country skiing. And
Got it.
while I didn't appreciate their sport of choice at the time, I skied with them. I heard their stories. It motivated me to be an Olympian someday. It gave me confidence that it was possible. And then as I got into high school, we had a local hero named Nina Kempel, who was the top woman in the country. And she invited me to come train with her.
Wow.
And when I went to my first World Cup, she took me around and introduced me to all the industry people. And so I was really lucky to have some great mentors that made it feel possible. They were relatable. And that is a special thing about growing up in Alaska for sure.
Yeah. Got it. And so 16 years old, you decide that's it, I'm going for the Olympics in 3 years in Salt Lake City. And so and you said I cut you off, your first trip to Europe happened then?
My first trip to Europe actually happened. It just turned 17. That was the first year I really switched to full ski training. And I got to go over to World Juniors in Slovakia.
Uh-huh.
And so it was really, really eye opening to rub shoulders with the Europeans and get skied over a little bit, but also got a top 10 at those championships and went, okay, I feel like I can get in the mix here. And then the next year, my senior year of high school, I qualified for the world championship team and I got to go race in Lahti, Finland, where it felt like the Super Bowl. I mean, tens of thousands of fans in the stadium.
Wow.
I skied the anchor leg for Team USA. It was just like so thrilling.
Yeah.
And then the next year was trying to make the Salt Lake Olympic team, which I ultimately did.
You did. And so how was that feeling? Like, I know some sports, it's not unusual to be 16, 17, 18 in them, but like, is that normal in cross country skiing to be that young in the mix?
It's typically not very usual. I mean, cross country skiing, being an endurance sport, it's one of those things that just requires years of training to physically build up your body, but also the experience piece in your mind. You've got to just get a lot of repetitions of racing. And so usually your Olympians are late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
But in Salt Lake, they introduced a new event called Sprint, which was 1.5 kilometers or approximately a mile. And that seemed to open the door to a younger racer.
Mhm.
Now, again, looking back, I can see the way that race works is everybody goes out and skis the course for time. And then the top 16 move on to a quarterfinal, and then there's a semifinal and a final. Nowadays, it's actually top 30. But to go out and lay down a fast qualifier, we're talking like 3.5 minutes.
Wow.
I could do that. That didn't require as much of the years of training and everything. And so that kind of allowed me to get my foot in the door a little bit earlier. I also had some decent results in distance nationally, but I think that sprint was key because that opened the door. And really, I had a lot of my earliest success in that event. And then I developed my distance skills later on.
And so how did those first Olympics, actually, before we get there, how was the qualifier? Were you nervous? Were you like, already confident, like I'm fine, I'm already, top in the world here, I'm going to be good? Or how was it going into that for the first time?
Well, I was really so young, I didn't fully understand the qualification process.
Yeah.
So we had about a month worth of racing around North America as part of the qualification, and the early races went pretty well, but then around the holiday time, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I started to struggle with a lot of low energy, and even went in and got tested for mono, and we couldn't figure out what was going on, and I almost felt like my Olympic dream at that point was slipping away.
Wow.
So when I went to the national championships, which were kind of the final time to qualify, I was just like, "I hope I can race. I don't know if I'm fighting for an Olympic spot or not." And I can't explain what happened. I think I rested a lot trying to get over the fatigue,
Yeah.
and I came out and I won my first national title in the sprint.
Wow.
I had 2 top 3s in distance, and, a few days later, I got the call that I was making my first Olympic team,
Amazing.
and that was just a dream come true.
Yeah. And so how was the training process leading up to the Olympics? How was like, because you go to training facilities, you will really become a part of that community at that point, correct?
Yeah, my path to the Olympics was a bit unique in that I was, still considered a junior racer, and it was my final season to race at the World Junior Championships. So, my prep had really been solely focused on the World Juniors because I knew it was my last shot.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those championships did not go super well. I got sick leading into it.
Wow.
But I was over in Europe, and then as soon as those championships ended, that was mid-January, then I came back over and I joined the rest of the Olympic team in Utah where we were doing our preparation camp. But for me, going into those games, like as much as I wanted to go win a medal for Team USA,
Yeah.
I had to be realistic and understand that those Olympics were really about gaining experience.
Yeah.
It was gonna be seeing what it was like to compete on that stage when there's so much attention and so much pressure, get in, try to just get closer and closer to the leaders. So I went in with a little different expectation than say Nina did, because she knew it was her final Olympics and, to win that elusive women's medal that had never been won, was on her mind. So it was kind of cool for me to jump in and just take it in, of course, give it my best. Surprisingly, one day I finished 61st in the 5K Classic, and I came back to the team area afterwards, like pretty disappointed because 61st place does not sound that exciting. And my coach came running up to me and he just was like, "Wow, that was your best race of the season. Like you were like a minute closer to the leader than you've ever been. Like you just had fantastic." And I feel so grateful for having those kind of people around me because I do see a lot of young athletes who go to the Olympics and you can't help but feel the pressure to win medals.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you could walk away feeling like a failure when in fact you may have just taken a step forward.
Yeah.
And so I was happy to have the right support around me. I enjoyed those games immensely. And then a week later, I went to the junior nationals and I got my butt kicked. So it was like the right amount of humbleness, to get to see what that level was like, but to also understand that I was still early on my progression.
And did you digest it that way, like walking away from the Olympics and being like, I got to participate, but I didn't end up like, you can't help but dream of standing on the podium with a gold medal when you get the notice that you're going to be there. Like, you came to terms with that pretty easily, or was that a little bit of a struggle?
Like I said, I think having really
Yeah.
good coaches around and my parents also to just kind of remind me it's really about you can look at your results in a lot of different ways and you can learn from every experience. And so I left those games and I said, okay, I feel like I know where I stand now,
Mhm.
and I know I want to win a medal someday. And I watched Becky Scott from Canada win a medal.
Yeah.
And she was, the first North American woman to do so. And so seeing her do it, and I actually remember standing in the stands during her award ceremony and, like, looking at the banner that said, "Light the fire within," and feeling like this rush, like, "Gosh, if she can do it, then surely I can someday."
Yeah.
So I came back at the end of the games, and I sat down with my coach in Anchorage, and I said, "Help me understand how I get from 61st place to being competitive for a medal." And he was a super analytical guy, and he got to it and calculated it out, and it turns out, like, it was gonna take 8 to 10 years with a realistic progression year to year because you first have to get success in the World Cup and then the World Champs, and, of course, the Olympics only comes every 4 years, and that was both daunting at age 19 to look at, but also provided a roadmap
Right.
and showed me that if I just progress year over year, I could do it, and I had also just made my first Olympic team at 19. And it was like, geez, I'm just going to work harder than anybody, and I'm gonna beat that plan. I'm gonna get there sooner. So, it came out of the 2002 season just with a lot of motivation.
Awesome. And so, did you just? I guess you use the World Cups and the different other competitions to continue to train, or how did you think about it? I'm always wondered, from as an Olympian, is the winning the Olympics is like the creme de la creme, or were the World Championships and all these other competitions just as valuable to you?
Well, thank goodness that we have all these other competitions, because otherwise 4
Yeah,
years is an incredibly long time to wait to be able to measure your progress.
yeah,
So, my in those years following 2002, a lot of my goals were focused around how I skied against my age group. So we had, even though I finished my World Junior eligibility, but they had just created the under 23 World Championships. So it was about improving my results there.
yeah.
Then it was about getting experience of racing on the World Cup. And the World Cup is a series that happens from late November through the end of March every season. And the world's best athletes are there every single weekend. So it's a great chance to come and test yourself week in and week out in different conditions, in different formats. And so, early on, I'd be in the 50s and 60s at those World Cup races. In fact, I think I even finished dead last in one of them. But it was about kind of seeing the progression over time.
Mhm.
And then, we had the World Championships every other year. So that was a good time to test, because the World Cup is great, but people can be training hard, they can have like other priorities.
Yep.
But when you come to a championship, everybody is trying to be at their peak for that week or 2 weeks. And so that's when you really get the measure. And that's the closest thing to the Olympics. So
Mhm.
it was really just about kind of moving up. And, I had the Olympics in 2006 and 2010
Mhm.
as checkpoints. And those were always incredibly motivating, sometimes surprising. I didn't always come in with the confidence that I was on track, but usually left those games feeling like, okay, I am heading towards where I want to get to.
And yeah, how was 2006? You had this roadmap you laid out in 2002. Once you how did 2006 go?
Well, the season before had been really a disaster. I gotten super homesick when I was over in Europe. I finished like second to last at the World Championships. Our women's relay had gotten pulled out of the race because we were going to be lapped by Norway. And to top it off, at the end of the season, the US ski team, due to funding cuts, had to cut the entire women's program and development team. So I went into the 2006 season. I was super lucky that I had my club team, Alaska Pacific University, as a place to fall back on and support me in the build up to that Olympic season. And I went into those games with the goal of finishing top 20 in the sprint. And I was super nervous. I didn't necessarily feel like I was in the shape I needed to be, but I went out there and surprised myself and ended up finishing ninth in the sprint. And that was clearly a step forward, a new level for me. And that performance then springboarded me onto the World Cup the next season, and that was an important step that then I could start racing World Cups consistently in the lead up to the 2010 games.
What made it springboard you? Is it sponsorship, or what opened that door for you after that?
It's really just the chance to get experience. I mean, it's the confidence.
Got it.
The confidence is huge,
Yeah.
because knowing now that you can get, like in the sprints, knowing you can get into the rounds, that you can race shoulder to shoulder with these women, you feel like you belong. And now it's just about improving the consistency. But then the next season, being able to race in the World Cup week in and week out, having that support from the US ski team was crucial,
That's what I
because you have to have that for experience. The challenge for me in those years was I was the only woman on the team. So it meant we didn't always get to compete in the relays, and it meant I spent a lot of time in a hotel room by myself, you know, getting a good result one weekend and then being back in the 50s the next weekend, and just like having to kind of keep that quiet confidence going. And that's what ended up really inspiring me to help build a women's team that became our ultimate proud accomplishment, through 2014 and 2018.
And so you springboard into the World Cup. You got through sort of being the only woman. How did that lead into 2010? That sounds like it's the sort of fast side of the timing your coach said. It's 8 to 10 years. Here we are 8 years in. Did you go in there going, I'm going to win a medal?
Well, the funny curveball we had in cross country skiing is that there are 2 techniques. And just kind of like in swimming, how you have the freestyle and the breaststroke and the backstroke, we have skating and we have classic.
Uh,
And the sprint event, which was my best, flip flops each games. So in 2006, it had been a freestyle sprint,
Yeah.
but in 2010, it was going back to classic. And so that is my weaker of the two techniques. So I had won a World Cup. I had started to get podiums in freestyle sprints leading into the 2010 games. So had that been a freestyle sprint, I may have been in a position to medal.
Yeah.
But it was classic, and I had never been top 12 in a classic sprint before those games. So my goal was to try to improve and make it into the semifinals, which was top 12.
Mhm.
And I did that. I ended up again kind of surprising myself, and I finished 8th. I narrowly missed making the final, which would have been top 6.
Yeah.
And I had some good distance races, and I ended up we had great results in both the team events. And so I left the 2010 games even though I didn't have a medal. I've had so much confidence that I was on track, and I knew in 2014 I would get a chance at a freestyle sprint.
And how were you? I guess were you ever discouraged? It sounds like you were pretty motivated the whole time. You're like, "That's cool. Going to the next one." Like, you started this Olympic process at 19. You're now 27. You went home with progress, but you still got another. Now you got to go through another 4 years of training to make it there. It sounds like you did leave saying like, "Great, we're going to be good in 2014," or did you have a little bit of like, really another 4 years?
Well, thankfully for me, I loved the lifestyle, and I had built the right environment around me. Coming from a place like Anchorage, Alaska, where the whole community was super supportive. We have snow like 7 months of the year. We have access to training facilities. I had my club team that was supporting me. I had the national team that was supporting me. As my results were getting better, I started to garner more sponsorship, which was very crucial part for being able to focus on training for the amount of time I needed to progress. And so, like, everything felt like it was coming together. And like I said, I've always really enjoyed the training process. So to go out and spend a few hours a day, like making my body stronger with people I enjoy being with, and then traveling the world and having these big goals. And I'm not, even though I hadn't got that Olympic medal yet, I was getting
Yep.
important goals every season. So that's when you get to the fun part. If anything, that's like 4 years is gonna be here in a blink of an eye. I'm just so excited.
That's awesome, and that's the right way to look at it, obviously. And the idea of celebrating the small wins and the incremental progress, and not just focusing on the one big grand prize, I think is also really important. So you get into 24. Where was 2014 Olympics? Remind me.
It was in Sochi, Russia.
Oh, that's right. I remember. Okay, and so you go to Russia. Did you go in confident this is going to be your year? Did you feel like you had the prep? How was that walking in there?
I did. I mean, walking into the Sochi Games was a really special feeling because in the previous 2 seasons, I had won the overall sprint title, which had proven myself as the best sprinter in the world over, like, multiple courses and conditions. I had started to garner national attention for cross country skiing and our team, which was both exciting and overwhelming because all of a sudden I had to manage media requests and commercial shoots in addition to all the training.
Yep.
But I really felt that my training coming into the Sochi Games was going really well. I did have a back injury about 6 weeks before the games that threw me off slightly. That had me a little worried, but I seemed to work myself back just in time for the games. So I went into those Olympics just excited for the freestyle sprint, and my everybody was saying I was the gold medal favorite, and I felt that deep in my heart. But we also, our women's team had really started to show up on the scene, and we were hunting for medals in both the 4x5 and the team sprint, which had me equally as excited as my individual goals. So I went in with all the confidence in the world.
And do you think that helped you perform better, or what? Like, do you think? I'm always curious about, like, especially for a top achieving athlete like yourself, does that confidence and that sort of calmness of like you're not nervous, you're confident, does that help you perform, or do you think you would have performed either way?
Oh, you're still plenty nervous.
Yeah,
It's all about managing those butterflies,
yeah,
going on. I mean, for sure, it was the biggest pressure I'd ever faced coming into a games, and I really just tried to work hard, with myself, my own self-talk, and the team around me, realizing it wasn't something epic and, out of this world. It was another race. It was one day, and so just tried to just build on that confidence and just do what I had been practicing for the 12 years leading in. I think in the end, the results at those games did not go as I had hoped, and as I look back, I think there were just a few things that were just a little off. I you hope you get the timing right for that 2 weeks, and out of that whole season, that was kind of the timing was off that 2 weeks. And I had it before and I got it back after, but it just when you have that one window, there's a lot riding on it.
And so what were the results of that Olympic?
So I qualified 17th in the sprint, so I got into the quarterfinals, but actually lost the photo finish for third in my heat, and I got eliminated in the quarterfinals.
Got it.
So I don't even know what my final place was,
Yeah.
probably somewhere in something like 21st. But my day ended super early, and that was just a shock.
Yeah.
I mean, NBC was there to capture history. Everybody was expecting me to win the medal, including myself, and to be knocked out in the quarterfinals was just I was almost in disbelief.
Yeah.
But my teammate, Sophie Caldwell, in her first Olympics, ended up making it all the way to the final. And so being able to kind of pour my energy into her good results and see her put one up for the team was a great consolation. And then I really tried to put that one behind me and move on to the relays, but again, just didn't quite have the gears. Something was just slightly missing, and so we didn't have the performances in the relays that we wanted either. And so unfortunately, we left Sochi no medals, and then I knew myself that I wouldn't get another shot at a skate sprint for 8 more years.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was tough to miss on that opportunity for sure.
And did you what were the conversations then with like your coach, et cetera, about like, it's all good, we have a new 8-year plan, we're going to get this done? Like how was that conversation?
Well, I kind of felt like at the end of the games, I had a big decision to make. I was still in a good fight for the overall sprint globe, but that meant 3 more weeks of World Cup racing, getting potentially pummeled by the women who had just, put it to me at the Olympics. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't walk away from that unfinished. It's like I'd put in the work. I just needed to go out and put my best foot forward every day. And, as long as I gave it my best, I could walk away from the season proud. And I got my gears back. I won the next World Cup sprint, and I won the globe for the 3rd year in a row. So, in the end, that was actually an accomplishment I'm really proud of, because that takes consistency over the whole season, and I know how easy it would have been to walk away.
Yeah.
But at the end of the season, I had another big decision to make because my husband had been putting his career on hold. We had wanted to start a family, and we'd been putting that on hold. And I knew I wouldn't have another shot for 8 years, which would put me at almost 40 years old, which is a hard time to keep up that kind of competition. So I thought to myself, well, maybe this is it. I've had a pretty amazing career. I've got world championship medals, globes,
Yep.
just didn't get that Olympic medal. But at the same time, we had just built the team to such a point where it was so fun to be a part of, and it was on the rise. And we knew we'd have team opportunities for medals in 2018. And so I didn't feel ready to walk away. So what I did is I raced one more season. That season, unfortunately, didn't go super well. I think I was carrying a lot of extra mental load coming off the Olympics, and had some things going on in my personal life that were hard to manage. But then that next season, I actually took the winter off from racing, had a baby, and then came back.
Wow.
And so then I had 2 more years of traveling with my family on the road.
Yeah.
And everything at that point was icing on the cake.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the future was going to hold, so I just took it week by week, and the team was really supportive, and we traveled with my son all around the World Cup, and those were an amazing couple of years.
Did he get on skis at
18 months.
18 months. All right.
He's an April baby, so the timing was better at 18 months.
August baby that's going to be on a snowboard in December for sure.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah, whatever.
you just have to, at least for the photo op, right?
Yeah, 100%. All right, and so you did 2 more years. Did you go to the Olympics in 2018?
I did. Yep. So I came back that first season. I ended up getting a bronze medal at the World Championships. And I credit that with the distraction of changing diapers and washing out bottles in the hours before the race that kept me nice and calm.
Yeah.
So that was like the proof I needed that I had worked my way back after having a baby. And then going into the 2018 season, I knew for sure it was going to be my last season. I wanted to go to those games, and I wanted to be a part of the relays to try and compete for medals.
Yeah.
And everything was going great up until about 6 weeks before the game. And I don't know what it is about that time period, but I developed a stress fracture in my foot. And so I had to back out of racing. I was holed up in Switzerland with my family. I was aqua jogging and like doing upper body work, freaking out that I may not make my final Olympic team. While my teammates were all, on the World Cup racing really fast.
Yeah.
And so it was touch and go there. I ended up getting named to the team. I went to Korea not knowing if I'd have a start. And then it was like, I got a start on the first race. And that race didn't go great, but it went okay. They gave me another chance. And then it was like every race to the games I was progressing. And then it came up to 36 hours before the team sprint, which is a 2-person event that we knew we could hunt for a medal in. And so 36 hours before I got the word that I was going to be one of those 2 athletes.
Huh.
And that was the most incredible news I could have asked for, except I also knew that it meant that 7 of my teammates were not going to be on that team. And they were so supportive. And so when Jesse and I got named that team, we knew we had prepared well and we needed to go out. And I knew that would be my last Olympic race.
And so how did it go?
So I will say I was as nervous for that race as I was for any other race in my career. We were up against some of the greatest athletes of all time in our sport, but I also was so excited to have that opportunity. And we had our relay socks on, which had provided some magic, and our Team USA on our cheeks. And I just went out there that night and tried to really be in the moment. And I wanted to walk away knowing I'd given everything I had. And after 6 grueling laps between the semifinals and the finals, I was skied leg 1 and I got to fall in the snow completely exhausted, knowing I had given everything while my teammate was out on the final lap of the race. And when I got up and looked at the scoreboard, I saw the leaders coming down into the stadium. And there was a hairy moment where skis bumped and my teammate kind of got shot wide and almost off the course, but she made it back in. And when I saw them coming down the final stretch, my teammate Jesse was neck and neck with Sweden. And I saw a lunge at the line, and I had to look up at the scoreboard. And when I saw number 1 United States 0.19, I completely lost it because we didn't just get a medal. We had won the gold medal that our team had been working for so long, and finally got to, break that, and to do it as a team was the most incredible thing ever. And our entire team was there on, cheering for us, and we all just got to have this big group hug, and it was the most incredible finish to an Olympic career I could ever imagine. I mean, Jesse really came out with something special that night.
And that was your 5th Olympics, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And my first Olympics as a mom.
That's awesome. And your son was 2, you said?
Almost 2, yep.
Almost 2? That's awesome. And so, I mean, how I don't even know if you're going to be able to describe that feeling of like you committed, basically 20 years to this sport, from 16 to 35. It sounds like, if the time's all right, and you came out literally gold medal, meaning you are the best in the world at what you knew would be your last Olympic. Like, is there anything to compare that to, or is it just that it was that crazy?
Well, I like to say you couldn't have written the script any better.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say this because, here I sit, retired with a gold medal in my hand and just, a great fairy tale to talk about. But I couldn't have had my career unfold in a more beautiful way, because I remember watching Sarah Hughes, the figure skater, win the gold medal in Salt Lake at age 16 and thinking, well, that's pretty cool. But if you do that at 16, where do you go from there?
Yeah.
And I had just like this beautiful progression where I had these challenging goals along the way, but it was, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, having the patience, having the determination, building the team, knowing in my heart I could win a medal in 2014, giving it all, not getting it, realizing life is still okay and that it really is about the journey, getting another 4 years, getting to do it as a family, and then getting to race that night. I mean, when I put my skis onto the snow at the start line, I had this thought of just, as no matter what happens, I'm gonna get to walk away with a beautiful career, and that's when the gold medal happens. It's
Yeah.
just, I can honestly say that if we hadn't won the gold medal that night, I think I would have walked away with just as much satisfaction and appreciation for what I got to do for 20 years.
And so, side note, how often do you throw on that gold medal just for fun?
Well, my gold medal's looking a little haggard these days because it really has traveled around
Yeah.
and met a lot of people, and that has been the funnest part of,
Yeah.
it's personally satisfying to achieve a goal like that, but to see the effect that this gold medal has had on getting people excited to get out and ski,
Yeah.
on our young athletes believing now in what's possible. It's the effect has just been so big, and it is hard to describe. So I have to check though every so often. I have to check and see if it's still there and see if this wasn't just a wild dream.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome.
my son thinks it's fun to pick it up and play with it too.
Yeah,
So
which is awesome. It's nice to be a hero to your own kids sometimes. And so, what after you did that, how long before? Like, what was next? What did you want to do? You knew you were retiring in 2018 either way. Were you retiring from cross country skiing or just the Olympics?
I knew I was going to be done racing,
You are.
mostly because, like I said, my husband had been putting his career on hold. We wanted to have another child, and I just kind of knew, like, the team's in a great place. I feel like I can walk away, and I knew I still wanted to stay in great shape,
Yeah.
and maybe pursue some physical tests in a different realm that would be something new. Maybe get into some bike racing, or I wanted to run a marathon.
Hmm.
So I was looking forward to that, and then literally 24 hours after we won the gold medal, I learned that I had been elected to the IOC by my fellow athletes to be on the IOC
Yeah.
Athletes Commission.
Wow.
And that literally went from like, you're elected, okay, I need you in this meeting right now. You got to do this tomorrow. Like I got pushed into a life I didn't quite know I was getting into. But that was also a wonderful way to take my athletic experience and still give back to the sport. So launched into this like my career's done. I'm going to experiment with what's next. And then 3 months later, I found out I had breast cancer, and that changed the trajectory quite a bit, at least for a while. I had to focus on getting through that.
Yeah. And were you working with the IOC during that whole period, or did you just take a step back for that?
They were incredibly supportive and understood that my ability to travel internationally was going to be limited. So I participated from afar,
Yeah.
virtually, kind of before virtually became the thing that it is today. So I was still involved with both the IOC, and then I also had become a board member of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee.
Hmm.
So I was doing stuff with them too, and I found that even through my active treatment, still having other things to focus on
Yeah.
besides just how crappy I was feeling
Yeah.
and what I was facing, definitely helped. So I was happy I was still able to do some of that. And then when I finished my active treatment after about 10 months, then I was able to get out and start traveling. And that year I spent 270 days on the road.
Wow.
It was like went from one extreme to the other.
Out the starting gate.
Yep.
And do you think, I'm curious, just going through that treatment, do you think that the grit that it takes to do the training you did for the Olympics and everything actually helped you with the treatment? Like, you knew what it was in a very different way to struggle, to grind, to have to push your body. Do you think that was beneficial, or do you think it was just a completely different thing?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that coming so quickly off the heels of being in like Olympic level shape
Yeah.
helped me tremendously through my cancer journey, both physically, but probably more importantly, mentally.
Yeah.
I think, when you get hit with a cancer diagnosis, there's so many thoughts running through your mind. And as an athlete, you're often encountered those same kind of, doubts. Maybe you're scared. And so being able to slow down the conversation in your mind and really boil it down to what can I control and what is out of my control, focusing on those things that you can actually control, and then choosing to believe in hope and, the outcome you want. It's going to take patience, it's going to take grit, but you keep that vision of where you want to get to as your motivator, and you just kind of work through things day by day. And I think having been so practiced with those mental patterns as an athlete really helped me get through the mental challenge of facing cancer.
Love it. And so post cancer, you said 270 days on the road, full fledged back into it. Is that what you've continued to do to today? Are you still working with the IOC?
Well, it's been a roller coaster. As soon as I finished treatment, I launched into all these things, but pretty quickly, my traveling took me away from home a lot, and I realized that, especially after going through cancer, the most important thing was for me to spend time with my family.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to pull back on my amount of travel, start to kind of investigate things that I could do that would keep me a little closer to home when the pandemic hit. And, that was a confusing time for everybody, but for me, it gave me that chance to pause and think and restructure. But at the same time, I kind of had a surprise bomb in my personal life, and my husband and I split up kind of due to some of his choices, not mine.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, I'm there in the middle of a pandemic. I'm living in a new country, and I'm on my own. And
Mhm.
so, as I navigated that, I realized now it's really important that I focus on family, and I'm here for my son.
Yeah.
And as much as I loved the work with the IOC, it had so many cascading roles, and a lot of it was volunteer,
Mhm.
and I had other priorities. So I talked to them about what I was going through, and they were sad to see me go, but supportive, and I was able to find a replacement for my position that could step in, so there was no gap in representation. And so in 2021, I did make the difficult decision to step away from IOC. And around that same time, I got contacted by the local ski organization in Anchorage, my hometown,
Mhm.
and they said, "We're looking for an executive director, and your name came up. Would you consider coming back?" And that's what I decided to do, and that brought me back to Anchorage, Alaska, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
And like, what age are you working with? Who, like, what, who are the, yeah, who's on that team? Who are you working with?
So what's kind of fun is the Nordic Skiing Association of Anchorage, which is the organization I'm leading,
Mhm.
is kind of the backbone of cross country skiing for all stuff in Anchorage. So we groom a 160-kilometer trail. We run a youth program for over 1,000 kids. We do all the racing for middle school and high school. We oversee a biathlon range and a ski jump facility. We run local races. We put on community events. Like there's a wide breadth of what we do,
Yeah.
and it's literally the system that I grew up in. I
Yeah.
started with Junior Nordic when I was a kid. I
Yeah.
did high school racing here. I raced national championships here. I participated in all the events. So to come full circle and now be able to take my experience from having traveled all over the world, I've done competition at every single level. I have contacts in the IOC, down
Yeah.
to like, it's just really been fun to come back. And it's given me a lot of gratitude because as a racer, I just used to show up and there was a beautifully groomed trail and the volunteers had been out there for 3 hours already getting things set. And now I understand what that takes.
Yeah.
And so, but I know how important it is, and I love being a part of making it happen for people to just enjoy the sport of skiing and be out there and be healthy.
Is your son following in the footsteps cross country?
Kinda, sorta. So, he started our junior Nordic program last year as a polar cub at age 6,
Yeah.
and he loved it. He loved being out there. He's kind of a goofy kid, so he's playing with his friends. There was a giant snowbank that he got to play on afterwards. So I was curious when the opportunity came up this summer for registration, and I said, "Hey, do you wanna do junior Nordic again?" And he just looked at me and went, "Mom, I'm always gonna do junior Nordic." So, at the time being, he's into it, he enjoys it, he's done a little bit of ski jumping,
Uh-huh.
he's been doing some alpine skiing, and so just like my parents allowed me to try a lot of different things, I'm just happy to provide that for my son, and he doesn't seem to be super competitive right now, so as long as he enjoys the feeling of gliding on snow, I'm gonna be happy,
Yeah.
and, if he decides to be competitive later on, we'll see what unfolds.
Amazing. So, two last questions for you. Number one, what's next? Have you found your sweet spot? You're happy. You're just going to stick with this, or what? What are you thinking?
Well, geez, if anything, the last 4 or 5 years has taught me is that, you have an idea of where you wanna go, and part of it is, systematically working towards your step process to get there, but part of it is also being able to just adapt to things that come,
Mhm.
and so right now, my priorities are my family and my health, and being able to do things that are really meaningful to me, and I have a great setup for that right now. I'm still learning how to fit in the exercise part because I appreciate the challenges, if you're not a professional athlete and you're not your 100% focus.
Yeah.
But I've got a great position right now, and my son is at this wonderful age where he's just so curious and he wants to spend time with me. But I know in a few years, his life is going to develop
Yeah.
and he's going to be off doing other things, and then, maybe my focuses will change a little bit. So I'm pretty content right now. I have to say it's kind of feels kind of weird to not have like that big next thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
Other than I've got some great ideas on things I'd like to improve for the organization here, and I'm still very involved with the U.S. ski team and supporting our current group of athletes and making sure they have the resources they need to be competitive and supporting the development of skiing in this country. And I still do a bit of motivational speaking, sharing my experiences of as an athlete and as a cancer survivor.
Mhm.
And I love that. And we'll see where it goes.
That's great. And so, last question for you, which I think is an important one, but what would be one piece of advice you either got or wish you got that really kept you sticking with this? Like, you have such an incredible story of, again, 5 Olympics, really seeing it through to the end, coming out on top. Again, what's one thing that you either wish you heard or you did hear that really helped you along the way?
I think one of the biggest things I picked up, from my parents, from some coaches early on, was how it's about putting your best effort in, every single day. And some days that's going to get you what you want. That's going to be the record-breaking performance. It's going to be, landing that sponsor or, whatever. And some days you're going to give it your all and it's just going to be a miserable fail. But every day you do, it's putting these blocks in a pyramid and it adds up. And that like ability to put forward your best and be able to kind of analyze the effort and learn from everything and move forward has served me so well in every aspect of my life. And so I feel really fortunate that I got that guidance early on, helped me be a great athlete, and now it's something I'm learning how to inspire in others.
Well, love it. Well, Kikkan, thank you so much for coming on HawkeTalk.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.